I want to tell you a story about how Kirby Smart's program came into its own. And it's not in 2021 or 2020. It was way back in 2016. And it's not necessarily even when you thought it was. It was not the Auburn game and it wasn't the loss to Georgia Tech. Although the loss to Georgia Tech helped out a lot because you had the return of Nick Chubb and Sony Michel a season later, and it had been tough to visualize with Jake Fromm as the quarterback at that time, struggling as a freshman, struggling, you know what I mean, throwing the ball. That Georgia would play for the national championship in 2017 without those two guys. It was at Kentucky in 2016, a blistering cold night where Georgia had to save itself against the Cats. And as it turns out, Kentucky's been one of the tougher teams that Georgia's had to deal with physically and just generally speaking over the last 5 years. I want to tell you about that story right now and everything I remember from it. But first, make certain that you are getting Darkstruction. It's right down below. Look, there's a lot of stories in this book that have not been told before, a lot of anecdotes. There's several photos that have not been able to be produced just because of the internet not being conducive to it. But for books, the images look great and different. Be certain to pick this up for somebody like yourself or, you know, Georgia fans that you know. Darkstruction is right down below. Night game. SEC Network, Kentucky, Georgia, and the Dogs needed to win. Okay. They just come off the game in Jacksonville where they got just handled. Jacob Eason was not having a good time in Jacksonville. And this was a Kentucky team that was not great, but was about at Georgia's level, perhaps a couple of notches below. And, that night it came down to the final drive of the game for the defense and the offense. Kentucky's knocking on the door, and if you late in the game and they're inside the Georgia 10-yard line, if you've never been to Commonwealth at night, it is a frightening experience at times. It is extremely loud. It's not a traditional rivalry game, so sometimes it takes the guys a second or two to get up for the game. It's almost always cold. These are not great, you know, parameters for a late game in late season. Kentucky fans are extremely passionate about basketball, no question. They're not that far behind about football. They love the Cats. Georgia gets down there, first and goal inside the 10, obviously, for Kentucky, and they survive without giving up a touchdown. A touchdown would have been real trouble because I'm not sure Georgia could have come down and did what they needed to do at the end of that game. But some huge plays, and I want to make certain I get this right as far as who it was because this really, as a moment in Georgia football history, it's not going to be talked about. It's going to be a lot like the Charleston Southern game from 2021, which was as special a moment in Georgia history as anything, but turned out to be a game nobody will think about or remember. But in the fourth quarter of this game, Kentucky gets down, and the Dogs actually have just scored to go up 24-21. And Kentucky drives the ball 67 yards down the field. They're knocking on the door. First and goal at the 9. Kirby calls timeout. Benny Snell, a really good running back, stuffed at the 9. Benny Snell, second play, stuffed. 2-yard gain. Well, stuffed. Stopped. The first one was Roquan. The second one, Davin Bellamy and Julian Rochester. Then Kentucky calls a timeout. Third and goal. Steven Johnson, incomplete pass. Malcolm Parrish with the breakup. They got to kick a field goal. Let me tell you, they hustled down the field. All right. They got down 67 yards in 2 minutes. They were down there quick. So the ball game's tied. And here it is. I mean, Georgia's going to have to do it, which means Jacob Eason's going to have to do it, which means a lot of young guys got to do it. And I'll read their names as we go. First and 10 on the 25. Jacob complete to Nada, only a 2-yard completion. Now there's about I think there's about 6 minutes left in the game, something like that. I misspoke a minute ago. It was a 14-play drive by Kentucky for 68 yards, not 7 play. So here comes Georgia. There's about 2.5 minutes left in the game. Jacob to Isaac, 2 yards. Jacob to Wims, 12 yards, and they're off. 1st and 10. Nick, 3-yard pickup. Jacob, pass complete to Wims again, 12 yards, pickup. They're at midfield, 1st down. Jacob to Terry Godwin, 16 yards. They're at the 30. Now you're in field goal range. They're going to start getting careful with it. No more throws. Handoff, 2 yards for Sony. Clock is ticking. Handoff, Sony, 13 yards, 1st and 10 at the Kentucky 15-yard line. Timeout, Georgia. Here comes Georgia again, trying to win the game. Again, the game is tied. Sony, 7 yards to the Kentucky 8. I think there were 3 seconds left. They call a time. They try to ice Rodrigo Blankenship. Doesn't work. 25-yard field goal. Jacob Eason's the holder on this deal. Kick up and good. Celebration. And a couple of things happen in the 6 minutes or whatever that those two drives were. You had Roquan Smith stepping up, Davin Bellamy, Isaac Nada, Wims, Terry Godwin, Sony Michel. These were all guys, well, not Sony and not Nick, who I mentioned earlier, but there were a lot of guys, including Rodrigo Blankenship, that had to step up and did. And it was the defense, generally speaking. I mean, Roquan Smith was not a national icon at the time, but he made multiple big plays on that drive, but none bigger than stuffing Benny Snell on the 1st-and-goal from the Kentucky 9. Now, the other thing to be pointed out about this too is Kentucky was driving, and they could have killed the clock pretty good. Kirby called a timeout right when they got a 1st down going into their end zone. So he stopped the clock at 4 minutes. And remember, he had some difficulty with clock management. It wasn't the first time, but the South Carolina game going into the half in 2016, that was not an ideal situation. So this was something Kirby was still working on. Kirby was still growing as a coach too. But when they kicked that field goal and it went through and went in, they knew they were going to a bowl game at that point. They knew that they could come down and win the game. This was the 3rd time that the offense had come down and gotten them ahead, either with no time remaining or not much time remaining. So that was the Missouri game in 2016, the Tennessee game, and now the Kentucky game. So all of those games, the confidence, you could feel it after the game. But it was Rodrigo's kick. Rodrigo did not start the season as the field goal kicker at Georgia. He was not the guy. He eventually replaced and became the guy, but it was that kick, that game-winning kick, that helped, I think, him get the confidence moving forward. And the celebration after the game is what I remember the most, all right? In the corridor at Commonwealth, where Georgia packs up and runs onto the field and all that stuff. Commonwealth's changed since 2016. They've remodeled it, makes it look a lot nicer in the press area and even just around the stadium, generally speaking. But that was a huge win for Georgia. I mean, it's hard to put into words how big a deal that game was for them in that moment, because those guys desperately needed a win. Now, who did they beat a week later? The top 10 Auburn at home. Now, they lost to Tech by 1 in Athens, and this late stretch of the season was the growing up moment at Georgia. But I think that Kentucky game gets forgotten a lot. And when you think about Kentucky in 18 and Kentucky in 21, those were top 10 Kentucky teams that Georgia was dealing with. Top 10, top 11, whatever they were. They might have been top 10 when Georgia went up to the Commonwealth. Nobody is more physical than Kentucky. Teams might be better than Kentucky. Nobody's more physical than Kentucky. Now think about that. But that was the night up in the Commonwealth, in the bluegrass, on the artificial turf, when Georgia grew up. Rodrigo's Respect the Specs grew up that night. They showed up for the first time. It was an amazing game for the Dogs. It wasn't all perfect from that point forward, but that was where Kirby Smart and his program grew up for the first time. That's really where you could see it. It was up at Commonwealth. Hey, thanks for watching. We'll see you over on the website.